All right, thanks everyone for your patience and willingness to join Tevora for today's webinar, Preparing Your Environment for a FedRAMP Readiness Assessment. I'm Kevin Cutter. I work as a cybersecurity and compliance advisor for Tevora. I'm joined by Troy Dolan, Senior Information Security Consultant of our federal practice. For those of you that are still getting acquainted with Tevora, know that we're a premier management consultancy nationwide that supports several hundred information security services across 7 dedicated practices: threat management, cybersecurity framework compliance, data privacy, enterprise risk, cloud security governance compliance, solutions, and incident response. We were built from the ground up 18 years ago with the intention of being among the best InfoSec consultancies available. We've achieved this in the eyes of our clients by refining each dedicated practice with direct feedback from CISOs, CIOs, VPs, directors of security compliance, and their respective teams. Many Tevora principals and managing directors are themselves former CISOs, CIOs, and InfoSec veterans in both the private and public sectors. Tevora's approach to information security always leaves our clients more secure and with a foundation to build from. With that said, on the topic of today's webinar, Preparing Your Environment for a FedRAMP Readiness Assessment, please know that we are allowing for questions. So ask away, and we'll address these at the end of the webinar presentation. If we don't have time to get to all of the questions, please know that anything outstanding will be addressed in a follow-up email, either through Troy or from the Tevora Federal team. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn you guys over to Troy so we can dive in.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kevin, and thanks for that great introduction. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me on this webinar. As Kevin has said, my name is Troy Dale, and I'm a senior consultant with the federal practice. I've been within the information assurance cybersecurity field since about 2001. Started in the U.S. Navy as an information systems technician and was assigned to be the information assurance manager, information systems security manager for my surveillance unit that I was a part of. I was able to work there and transition over to working with the Department of the Navy as a federal civilian in Mechanicsburg as an information assurance officer, working on classified Navy systems and getting the DICAP, the DISCAP and DICAP accreditation processes, and then moving up to work at the higher level as an information assurance manager. I left the federal government and worked with several defense and government contractors. I've done work with the Department of Commerce at NOAA, and so that got me kind of exposed to the NIST RMF framework. And then I moved on to a defense contractor working within the intelligence community. I spent about 5 years there. Before I joined Tevora, I was a corporate information system security manager responsible for implementing the entire risk management framework across the enterprise and supporting various classified systems accreditations through DCSA and the JSIG. So I've done a lot of work within the federal space. I know a lot of the challenges that come with working with the federal government. And hopefully we're going to be able to provide some additional information to help you guys and go back to your organizations and make a determination and decision of which way you want to go and how you want to go through. I do have my CISSP, completed a Security Plus as well, and then did my GCIH. And I completed a 3-week U.S. Navy Information Assurance Manager course as well when I was in. Some of the services that we provide here, we are an authorized third-party assessment organization, and we are now posted on the FedRAMP Marketplace. So we are one of the organizations that you can utilize to do readiness assessments, gap analyses, doing actual accreditation and authorization packages to assist you within either agency or JAB authorizations. So also we are authorized to perform enterprise security risk assessments, and we follow the NIST frameworks, DFARS, working with cybersecurity, governance and policy standards and procedures creations, and you can see all of the different avenues of expertise that we have. And then after you achieve your FedRAMP authorization statuses, we can also assist you to perform your continuous monitoring and annual assessments and any other activities needed to keep your environment secure and maintain compliance with the FedRAMP requirements. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about what is FedRAMP, just a real quick overview of what FedRAMP was created for, the phases to obtain a FedRAMP authorization, and some authorization timelines. Now, a lot of these timelines and steps that we're going to look at, there are always some gaps and some slippages. It all depends on how things are configured, how your environment is, and other instances. So we can definitely talk a little bit more about how that would be unique to each situation on a more individual basis. So what is FedRAMP? So about 2011, the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program came about to provide a framework for federal agencies to secure cloud services and products that comply with White House and NIST requirements. As I had mentioned before, I've been within the federal space since about 2001. I've seen the whole range of going from a mainframe kind of cloud environment to bringing things on premises, and then the agencies had to actually request and put in validation of why they wanted to have a cloud hosting, and now it's moved to all the majority of cloud, and now agencies and different departments have to put in the request permission for why they do not want to go to the cloud. It's really focused on ensuring all the cloud services housing the federal information meet the required federal security standards and the requirements for the federal government to issue security authorizations for any IT system, following FISMA and White House policy, right? So any cloud providers that want to work with the federal government are required to follow these standards and the requirements that cover all the aspects for their systems. And there's some additional other items as well, like background investigation requirements, your encryption of data, physical security, all of these other nuances and additional controls that are required for CSPs to follow, right? So the real goal of FedRAMP is to allow multiple agencies, FedRAMP says do once, use many times. So allow multiple agencies to utilize the same cloud service offerings without having to go through the long, rigorous authorization and accreditation process that the RMF and the NIST frameworks kind of leverage, right? So if you have work with one agency and there's 2 or 3 other agencies that want to utilize your service, this way it reduces the amount of time that the additional agencies have to go through their own accreditation process for you and with you. They can leverage it through FedRAMP, okay? Also, it's focusing on eliminating the duplication and reducing cost. This will help by providing a reusable security authorization model by which agencies can obtain the safe and secure cloud technologies to help modernize federal IT. You can do one of 2 ways that you can achieve your FedRAMP security authorizations, and that's by working with the FedRAMP Joint Authorization Board, the JAB, with the Program Management Office, the PMO, or by working directly with an agency that can provide that authorization. It all depends on if you currently have that relationship with an agency. That's probably a good way of going about it. If you don't have a relationship already, but you have a use case that your offering can be used across multiple agencies and departments, then the JAB authorization is a way to look at it as well. As you can see in this graphic, there are 150 plus agencies that utilize FedRAMP cloud offerings that are FedRAMP authorized. 220 plus cloud service providers, and that's from a SaaS or a PaaS or a IaaS that is provided. And you can see over 250 million in cost savings annually for the government, right? So one of the things that had happened when FedRAMP came about around 2015, agencies started seeing that the authorization process was taking a year to 2 years to complete. And if you guys are very familiar or have understandings of government contracts, when government contracts are awarded, the departments or the agencies really don't want to be waiting 2 years for an authorization, an accreditation to perform work and to do work. They would like to get that done as, get that started as quickly as possible, but it's the chicken and the egg, right? So you can't start work until you have an authorized system, but you can't get an authorized system until you have that contract. So what had to happen? Something had to happen, right? So FedRAMP PMO went back and said, okay, we're going to kind of look to see how we can shorten the process, how we can make it easier, not only for the agencies to determine who they can use, but also for the cloud service providers to be able to get in line and get moving to provide these services. So they came up with a FedRAMP Accelerated program, which enables the federal government to kind of accelerate the adoption of the cloud computing. And it is dropped to where most organizations are able to get an authorization or at least FedRAMP ready in about 6 months. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about the differences between authorizations and FedRAMP ready. So here we go, 5 phases to obtain our FedRAMP authorizations, right? This is our Tevora's planned approach to meet organizations' needs from initial planning and road mapping to support entry into the federal government supply chain space. The initial FedRAMP readiness assessments, technical support with required FedRAMP pen testing and accredited assessments to support the submission of a security authorization package to either the JAB, the Joint Authorization Board, or for a provisional authority to operate, or to your sponsoring agency authorizing official to get you awarded or get you issued an authority to operate. This may include helping working with you to write system security plans, implementing security enhancements, or performing other activities needed to ensure you're prepared for the FedRAMP certification. So on the advising and planning section of it, establishing that cloud service offering for government use. One of the things that is a good starting point, if your organization is just starting to decide whether you want to break into this realm, is go to the FedRAMP marketplace. See if what you have to offer is already out there, because that's going to let you know who are your competitors, who are currently in the FedRAMP marketplace, and would you have to have that direct competition, or do you not see any competitors on there? You don't see your offering on there at all, and then you can really kind of get that foot in, right? So the FedRAMP marketplace is an online repository, and it provides information about all the different cloud service offerings that have achieved a FedRAMP designation. And it also shows some federal agencies that leverage the FedRAMP compliant cloud service offerings, and also all the certified third-party assessment organizations like Tevora that are accredited auditors for FedRAMP assessments. So it's a one-stop shop, so you can see who your competitors are, you can see who the agencies are that are potentially using the services that you have or types of services that you might have, and then also who can assist you and who can provide you with all the accreditation and authorization package and support to get into the FedRAMP marketplace. Okay. This is kind of a little step of determining your authorization path. And like I had mentioned before, you have your JAB, your Joint Authorization Board, provisional ATO authorization, and then you have your agency authorization if you are already getting ready to work directly with an agency. So you can see where the timeline is, some of the steps that are involved, the partnership establishment, security assessments, authorization processes, all the way through to continuous monitoring. The JAB, while it is a little shorter, it shows us a little shorter, there are limitations with the JAB. The Joint Authorization Board only reviews I'm sorry. They only review 12 CSOs annually that they decide that they want to work with and work towards getting into the FedRAMP ready state. So that's one of the things that you have to have your package together. You have to be ready, and then they only meet and look over the different packages and select who they want to work for their provisional authority to operate. So that's why that timeline looks a little shorter, but that the beginning end of waiting to be able to get on that list to work with the JAB could take several months, right? So when we are going to start determining security impact levels, this is what you're going to have to originally start at. This is your system categorization, your FIPS 199, that's going to give you your categorization to determine what your impact level is, which is going to determine the controls that are going to be implemented against your system, right? So the majority of all of the CSPs that have cloud service offerings look at the FedRAMP moderate. There are some specific that are at the FedRAMP high that are that have much stricter controls depending on some of the law enforcement sensitive or CUI or some specific items that an agency is looking for to increase their security. There are some intelligence organizations that will utilize this as well. Not necessarily have classified information out there, but they do require a stricter set of security controls. And then there's a low impact SaaS, which is a specific software offering that is very limited in scope of what information it collects, and there are specific questions that must be answered to determine if you're eligible for that. Looking at this is all, as we go through and look at RMF and understand FISMA, all the confidentiality, availability, integrity benchmarks and your high water marks. So it's going to identify what your controls are. So if you look at a FISMA moderate versus a FedRAMP moderate, a FISMA moderate has about 265 security controls that get implemented. And you'll notice here there's for the FedRAMP moderate, there's 325, and that's because there's about 60 controls that are specific cloud controls that would not be addressed or would not be relevant for a regular FISMA. Okay, so step 4 is your implementation of security controls. So you go through, you're at a FedRAMP moderate, you have your 325 controls, but it doesn't stop there, right? You've got to also have and meet these federal mandates. Now, these are go, no-go mandates that must be met for you to continue on and provide a cloud service offering. So FIPS 140-2, validated cryptographic modules used where cryptography is required. One of those, the difference between FIPS 140-2 approved and validated is that the cryptographic modules are actually tested and validated against a standard, whereas some are just authorized. Can this system fully support, and this is something that I've seen and talked with several different clients about, is can the system fully support user authentication via the common access cards or personal identity verification PIV credentials, and this is all following HSPD 12 that federal employees utilize either a CAC or a PIV card. I understand that a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations have the multi-factor authentication, and that is great, but this is specifically because it's geared towards the federal government. There are specific requirements for this kind of support. Is a system operating at a digital identity level 2? This is for e-authentication, and that means is there high confidence that the identity being authenticated is valid, and that goes hand in hand with the CAC and the PIV card support, right? Vulnerability remediation, right? You have to be able to prove and show and prove that you are able to remediate your high vulnerabilities within 30 days, moderates within 90 days, and low vulnerabilities within 180 days. I've talked with different clients and that they are like, oh yes, well we can do our high vulnerabilities and our moderates, but our lows, we kind of just let them kind of go to the wayside because they're lows. Well, there's federal mandates that you have to meet the 180-day requirements. Does the CSP and system meet the federal records management for holding records, right? And then DNSSEC is another one. So you can see there's a bunch of technical controls that need to be mandated, and then there's some that are documentation and policy and controls that need to be mandated, right? So the next step within advising and planning is documenting your control set and preparing your supporting documents. Okay, the SSP is the comprehensive document that's going to provide an overview of your organization's security requirements, the system security requirements, right? It details the system architecture, all of the security controls that you have implemented, who's responsible for the implementation of those controls, whether it's a hybrid implementation, whether it is something that is inherited from somebody else, and then individuals who have access to the systems as well. Allows personnel to record and review the current conditions and the plans on how they're going to secure the system, right? Another purpose of the SSP is to provide priority to information security by outlining the status and the plans to protect organizational assets. All right. You'll also notice that there are a bunch of additional documentation, CSP's IS policy, your user guide, e-authentication, privacy thresholds, if one is deemed to be required, your rules of behavior, contingency plans, separation of duties, your inventory, just to let you know that not only do you have the SSP, but you have within the SSP, there are 15 sections and 13 additional attachments that need to be completed for it, right? So you do not have to have all of your documentation completed, right? I think that's a big question that a lot of CSPs have is, yeah, we've got our system and we've got it operational and it works and we've got our control set, but we don't have our SSP completed. We don't have our contingency plan completed or our configuration management or things like that. It's going to take so long to do that. Well, you don't, at this point, you do not have to have everything 100% completed. It's a good idea to have it in the works, have it, probably a majority completed, but that does not have to be 100%. You're going to have to be able to show organizational maturity and how you're going to complete the documents prior to getting your FedRAMP authorization, or even to get on the FedRAMP ready state. So in phases 2 through 5 really is getting into sitting down, engaging with a 3PAO and saying, okay, we'd like to have you come in and do a readiness assessment. We know we need to do our penetration testing eventually. We know we need to have our remediation and things like that after the initial readiness assessment. And then we can start formulating our package and getting that submitted, right? So there are specific items that the CSPs are responsible for. There are specific items that the 3PAO is responsible for. So the 3PAO will come in and we will utilize all of the FedRAMP templates. FedRAMP is very good about providing templates of what they would like to see and the information that needs to be completed in a specific manner. So they provide us with the templates, us as a 3PAO, If we pass those templates on or provide those templates to you, like a POAM, like a security assessment results, those templates, as new templates come out, it's our responsibility to provide those updates for you, right? But the 3PAO must submit the readiness assessment reports, the RAR, into OMB Max. And that is to ensure a proper chain of custody. That way the CSPs aren't having to, do their own work. That's the reason why there's 3PAOs. We are going to attest that the CSPs are at a certain point, right? 3PAOs should not provide RARs without your approval, though. And we're only going to submit a RAR if we believe that the CSP meets the required capabilities, okay? So to achieve the FedRAMP Ready designation, a CSP must partner with an accredited 3PAO to complete a readiness assessment. Now, the readiness assessment is a requirement for a JAB provisional ATO. It is not a requirement for an agency authorization, but it is highly recommended. And the reason why it's highly recommended is because you want to be able to make sure that before you submit everything to the agency AO for authorization, that you are in a ready state to be able to complete it and again get that authorization. So, but if you do not are partnered with an agency, going the JAB PATO route is the route that you would be looking for. So that we're going to submit the RAR to the PMO as an attestation that the CSO, the cloud service offering readiness for the authorization process. The RARs are reviewed, and this is going back to the original timelines that I showed. The RARs are reviewed by the FedRAMP PMO within about a week of submission. Now, this is all, I do want to say this is probably all pre-COVID, so there might be some gaps, there might be some slack within the reviews, and then that 1 week might turn into 2 or a little bit longer on. If there's any issues spotted by the PMO, and they used to say an in-person meeting, but I'm sure it's all going to be virtual. Meeting is held to discuss their comments and what is needed in order for the CSP to be deemed FedRAMP ready. Once the PMO approves a RAR, the cloud service offering will be designated FedRAMP ready, and then you'll be advertised within the FedRAMP marketplace, right? So that's a big step, getting that FedRAMP readiness report and making sure you have all of these sections, your system overview, your ability to meet the federal mandates, all your descriptions and diagrams, your data flows, and our attestation. Okay. One of the things that the full authorization comes into is a rules of engagement and a penetration testing. Just to let you know, there is no penetration test requirement to get onto the FedRAMP marketplace as FedRAMP ready. The discovery scan has to be performed, and you have to identify what your boundary is. And that's completed by the 3PO doing a discovery scan of the system and analyzing border devices for all your network traffic and configurations to ensure that your boundary is accurately described and mapped. One of the best practices is, because you're going to have a penetration test done anyway prior to FedRAMP authorization, you can get that test done earlier. And then if you already have a penetration test done previously, we can review that as a 3PAO. We can review that to see what kind of vulnerabilities were discovered and what the results of that test were to provide that attestation. Right. And like I said, the intent of the RAR is to determine the readiness and not guarantee it. FedRAMP Ready is all about the ability to sell to the federal government. An improved RAR by the FedRAMP PMO gives the CSPs a better ability to attract the federal customers by ensuring that you have the right capabilities and that you've been validated by a third-party assessor as well as a FedRAMP PMO, right? And then getting on with JAB prioritization. The RAR will be the first go, no-go decision point for that JAB prioritization. So as you know, I mentioned before that the JAB only takes 12 CSPs per year. Those 12 that they choose have already completed their readiness assessment report and already have that submitted and approved through the PMO as well. All right. Holy, where did that go? Oh, okay. So advisory remediation deliverables, we're looking at, this is after FedRAMP readiness or gap analysis. We've determined and looked and said, okay, well, you know what? We need to work a little bit more on your policy standards and procedures. We need to implement certain technical solutions, or you need to have that SSP documentation completed. We can provide some of the best practice recommendations on implementation of different technologies to meet these security controls, to provide that defense in depth, and to make sure that your continuous monitoring would be able to be performed as well. Configuration assistance, looking at different baselines and benchmarks and hardening guides to make sure that the technical controls also are implemented as well. Supporting documentation. This is where your control sets are all going to be identified within your system security plan. And as you can see, there are 17 control families. Like I said, 325 controls, either the controls or enhancements, and then all the additional documentation. So your logging and monitoring, your inventory, your change management. It used to be that the FedRAMP authorization process was like a snapshot in time of, oh, how is this system now? You know, at this one point, does it meet all the controls? Does, you know, all the controls implemented? And does it meet security? And is there defense in depth? And is the information going to be protected? And FedRAMP Accelerated has kind of changed that to think, okay, this is a starting point. The system is going to mature and grow with needs to have a different technical solutions implemented, you know, different things like that. So you can see all these documentations, all of these controls will be live documents as they need to be adjusted, as they need to be changed. You submit them in for administrative additions as well. Okay. All right, so the formal FedRAMP submission. After a CSP is prioritized to work with the JAB and is deemed FedRAMP ready, the CSP finalizes your security plan, right? So you have to finalize your SSP for your offering, and then you engage with your accredited 3PAO to continue on and finalize that accreditation package. The 3PAO develops the security assessment plan, will conduct a full assessment of the offering, and then we'll produce that security assessment report for you and for the FedRAMP PMO. Finally, we will also develop a POAM for you to be able to track and manage your system security risks as identified in the SAR. And then the SSP, the System Security Plan, the Security Authorization Package, or the Security Assessment Plan, I'm sorry, and the Security Assessment Report and the POAM completed are going to be provided to the FedRAMP PMO. In addition to, you know, all of the FedRAMP provided templates, and we're going to submit them all in. But the PMO is not going to, you know, go over line by line and look at everything. That's what our job is to do. The continuous monitoring submission then will all be considered in its entirety. It must be submitted about 2 weeks to the PMO prior to the kickoff meeting with the JAB. And then the FedRAMP PMO will coordinate with the CSP, the 3PAO, and then with the JAB to have that kickoff meeting, right? Authorization timelines. Oh, so this is really, I think, what a lot of organizations are looking to understand is how long is this going to take? Because companies are not typically in a position to have to sit and wait. You want to have that cloud service offering. You want to have it presented to the government. You want to be able to have the government utilize your cloud service offerings and, to make money, to bring that revenue in and to provide that service. Estimated about 2 to 4 weeks for a FedRAMP readiness assessment, right? So you can see the different phases that we have. And this is just a generic starting from Q4 of 2020. If you guys are at that point now, going into 2022, typically you'd like to have some of that advisory and planning just to make sure that you have all the aspects in place, that your cloud service offering is built, operational, all your controls are implemented. You don't want to say, oh, okay, well, we're going to use an event log aggregator, but we haven't chosen it yet, and we haven't tested it yet, and we haven't implemented it yet, but we know we're going to do one. You want to make sure that all of those are already in place. So about 2 to 4 weeks for that phase 2 of the FedRAMP readiness assessment. That would get you into that FedRAMP ready through the JAB PATO process, right? PMO estimates as well 1 to 2 weeks to review the report, like I said, and then looking at the remediation aspects of it, really depending on how much support you have from executive leadership, how much support you have dedicated through the project management, the amount of remediation that is needed after going through the phase 2 and 3, the readiness assessment and the penetration testing, and that's where that fluctuation is. But we put in there about a month, maybe 6 weeks for the remediation, and then another about 2 to 4 weeks for a formal assessment. So you can see a very aggressive 4 months if you're really on top of everything, really aggressive, typically about a 6 to 9 month process. And then you'll see that bottom bar for your continuous monitoring, right? That's one of the things that is the work doesn't stop upon the PATO or the ATO process. It's the continuous monitoring that has to be built in as well. So that is really in a high level, and hopefully that's something that can be digested and talked about internally with you and your leadership team and the decision, because really ultimately the decision and the knowledge is about what does our organization as a cloud service provider that has an potential offering, what does our organization want to do, and what direction do we want to go? Does it make sense to break in or try to get into that federal marketplace? Are you currently a CSP, cloud service provider, that has a cloud service offering that is being used by commercial entities, and you need to make sure that you're in line with what is required? We can provide that assistance as well. So I want to thank everybody for their time, and I guess we can go to questions now, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a few great questions come in over the course of your presentation, and I think I can speak on behalf of the audience. You did a great job delivering today, Troy, so thank you. So one of the first questions was, for a company with active SOC 1, SOC 2, PCI, and ISO 27001, in your professional opinion, how far away is a FedRAMP moderate compliance?
SOC 1, SOC 2, PCI, and what was the last one?
ISO 27001.
ISO 27001. Okay. Just by hearing those different frameworks and that have already been assessed and attested to, and understanding the FedRAMP process and looking at a FedRAMP moderate, I would say a lot of it the documentation I think is really key, and also the federal mandates. Understand that a lot of those frameworks do have the multi-factor authentication requirements. They have the encryption requirements, but the encryption is at 140-2 validated. Does the cloud service offerings, the offering that they have, already support the CAC PIV, which is not an easy infrastructure to implement. But if I were to give a percentage, I would probably, in my opinion, I'd probably say about 75% without knowing anything else, looking at documentation or anything of that. I'd probably say about 75 to 80%.
Excellent. So then another question we had, do we need to have a specific AWS FedRAMP environment for our SaaS solution?
You do not have to have a specific AWS environment. You do need to make sure if you are not hosting it on your services as a cloud service provider under a PaaS or an infrastructure as a service, if you're going to just have a SaaS, then you should look at FedRAMP. Azure has FedRAMP authorized environments as well. So you should utilize what is currently out there. Then you have to also look at the type of information that you're possibly going to be holding and being exposed to. As we all know, DFARS was implemented to protect the controlled unclassified information and hold the federal government or the DoD supply chain providers to a standard of protecting that data and that information. DFARS and the NIST 800-171 is now being evolved to CMMC, which is still being still being worked out. There are some items that the CMMC AB is working out, but there are going to be requirements of how that information needs to be protected. So, you can look at ITAR, possible ITAR requirements. Well, the ITAR requirements state that, you have to have a US-based environment with only US personnel that have access to it. So, AWS East-West could meet that, but definitely the AWS GovCloud does meet that. But here's the thing, then you have to start looking at all the different nuances between AWS East-West and AWS GovCloud. There are specific multi-factor authentication tokens that you have to use. Even if you use a virtual one, there's specific ones that GovCloud approves. So there's a lot of different items that are there. So it is best to utilize an AWS instance if you're going to go that way that is already FedRAMP authorized. But AWS is not, I should say AWS is not your only requirement or solution, I should say. So.
Excellent. And then kind of a follow-up question, are cloud services that are listed as in process considered FedRAMP compliant?
No. The in process is that they are going through their, they've probably submitted in their readiness. They have not gotten onto the prioritized list with the JAB yet, but they are not truly FedRAMP authorized. If you're going to utilize a offering if you want to utilize an offering that is FedRAMP authorized to kind of help with how your offering is going to be provided, the FedRAMP in progress is not an authorized status.
Great. And then we have a multi-part question that is related to vulnerability management. Okay. With regard to remediation timeframes of vulnerabilities, compensating controls allowed for consideration of mitigation per RMF. And then that's part one of the question.
So vulnerability management or compensating controls. Are we talking controls of, okay, we're not able to complete this remediation, this moderate vulnerability within 90 days, but we do not have it connected to an external connection? I guess that's,
That may be one that we could also take offline and follow up. So if
yeah,
the questions
yeah.
we're
Let
not
me.
able to get to, you can absolutely think to that. But in part 2 of this question, it says,
Mhm.
in your bio, it stated your conduct risk assessments. Which risk assessment methodology do you use most, i.e. NIST 830, ISO 27005, etc.?
So for my experience, I have been a true NIST 830 experience, especially with the amount of work that I've done on the federal side of it. I have gotten some exposure within the ISO frameworks and the enterprise risk assessments with Tevora, but I'd say the bulk of my experience has been within NIST.
Great.
So
then another question that we have here, if you utilize AWS, which might be FedRAMP high compliant, but your service falls under low, can you just rely on AWS FedRAMP compliant by demonstrating some monitoring controls at CSP level?
is that a question of the offering is a software, a SaaS offering that's in the FedRAMP or AWS High, and utilizing and inheriting their monitoring, like whatever their AWS services are at that high level?
Yeah, I would probably need
Is
to get a follow-up there to
yeah,
give you that additional detail, but these are great questions.
yeah,
Some other ones that are probably easier addressed, and obviously the content-rich ones for those that are still with us. We can set time with Troy and with Tevora's federal practice just to make sure that we iron all this out so that you have a good foundation going forward. But some of the additional questions we still have open, how often do you need to recertify?
there is continuous monitoring activities that breaks down the controls annually. It all depends on how long your ATO has been issued for, right? So the typical ATOs within the federal government are 3 years, but there are specific continuous monitoring activities that must be performed annually. There's a segment of the controls that are required, and there's an additional set of controls that are selected either by the 3PAO or the CSP to be continuously monitored. Your penetration testing, vulnerability scans, things like that are constantly updated and provided to the FedRAMP PMO. So,
Excellent. And then 2 different versions of the exact same question. How much does FedRAMP moderate cost on average? And I know, Troy, that can be a somewhat loaded question just from scoping this myself, but any answer you can get back there would probably be welcome to most of the folks that are still on here.
right. So scoping out, it's really if we were going to do a FedRAMP moderate for just a readiness assessment to get in line to be prioritized to work with the JAB and to be FedRAMP ready. That's not moving forward with an agency authorization. It's just getting ready, FedRAMP ready. You know, looking at the work, I'd say that's probably about a 6 to 8 week engagement just for the readiness assessment, the pre and working on the report and getting everything ready to go. I'm not entirely sure what the price. I mean, I don't without wanting to sound like I'm going to be, you know, in any kind of negotiations or discussions, oh, well, Troy said it should only cost, X amount of dollars. I do know, I will tell you that the full authorization, working with an agency and getting that full authorization because of the different departments that we would have to get involved with, the threat team, working with the penetration testing, working with, that longer engagement, it would be quite a quite higher amount. Kevin, I don't know if.
That's why I led with it being loaded. I kind of knew
Yeah,
to answer that one, but I wanted to at least throw it by you. So if we need to, we can
I
obviously take that offline for the two folks that asked that question.
yeah, I'd like to because I think a lot of it, because I think a lot of it is really going to have to be an understanding of what the environment is and at what
Right.
level and how complicated it is to really be able to give a good answer. And I don't want to feel like I'm kind of like trying to deflect that question, but it's just I think there's a lot of variables that need to be
No, it's an
answered.
honest answer. I think that's great. So there's two questions left. So thank you very much for you guys that have stayed on. So we'll get these addressed before we wrap, since we did assume an hour for this webinar. So with
Yeah.
NIST 853 Rev 5 being published, what will that mean for FedRAMP assessments?
Yeah, good question. So as we looked, we've got the FISMA moderate under the Rev 4, 260 some odd controls. FedRAMP throws it up there to 325. There's 17 control families. Rev control families, not control families that need to be addressed within all of this. The FedRAMP PMO is going to have to go back and kind of reset their templates and their security controls traceability matrices to include those additional controls, to look and identify out of those additional control families what controls are going to need to be included and what controls do not need to be included. So it's definitely going to kind of increase any engagements and any kind of assessments, because you're going to increase the number of controls, but I don't think it's going to increase it by I don't think it's going to double the length of time. It might just be, a couple hours. Our methodologies when we do interviews, it might include like 3 additional interviews to discuss with the subject matter experts on those individual control families.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, great. And then the last question, it looks like someone was just seeking a little bit more of additional information. So maybe this is within your notes, or this individual may have missed something, but indicated that the webinar documentation indicated the content would contain all sections contained in a SSP. My notes from the webinar didn't pick up on that information specifically. Did I miss something?
No, so in the SSP, maybe I might have kind of skipped over. I think that slide I showed, the one slide that I showed that has the SSP and the additional attachments, there are about 15 sections. And what I can do, I can, before we send this out, I can make sure that those sections are identified. But they get into, the name, the categorization level, the owner, contacts, who has security responsibility, the descriptions, inventories, things like that, that are the part of the SSP itself. One of the also things that we can provide to them is, like I said, the FedRAMP requires, or FedRAMP PMO requires, that all CSPs and all 3 PAOs utilize FedRAMP provided templates, and we can provide a template of an SSP, so the organizations that everybody that was on can actually see each individual section and determine what that level of effort is going to be. But it identifies, like I said, there's informational sections, and then all of the additional attachments that go in there as well. But I can share that with everybody when we send out the presentation.
I think that's perfect. And given that we have 3 minutes left and that we've addressed the majority of the questions on
Yeah.
here for those that are still attending, know that your respective Tevora rep will be in touch. They know the questions that you have asked. So if you are looking for further detail, either from Troy or also from Jeremiah Sahlberg, Tevora's Managing Director of Federal, we are more than happy to be additional resources as you guys start to navigate everything around this webinar. So we're available to you, so just let us know. But I think other than that, we're pretty much set here, Troy. So I really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions at large about Tevora outside of just Federal, which we covered today, feel free to ask your reps as they reach out to you here within the next 24 to 48 hours. Other than that, we'll give you a few minutes back, and everyone enjoy your Tuesday.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Mm-hmm.
All right.